Hello and welcome back to the Puncher's Chance podcast, and welcome to the preview show. We're having a look forward at the boxing coming up this weekend, as well as the start of the Zuffa reign, as Dana White I'm sure would like to call it. So if you like the sound of that, obviously stick around to the end, subscribe for more content. Straight into it. What do we think of Zuffa Boxing and Dana White? Because obviously going into this podcast, or last week when we were thinking about talking about it, in my head I was like, right, I'm going to go in on him here. I'm going to be saying how rubbish it is. And then they dropped the fact that they signed Jai Opetaia, which is kind of a bit of a spanner in the works. So, yeah, where do you see it?
I don't know, because it either feels like an exciting new future for the sport, or it feels something that could be very dangerous for the future of the sport and could put a lot of fighters at risk with some of the stuff that they're trying to implement, like getting rid of the Ali Act. Is obviously not a good idea. There's a reason why it was put in place to protect fighters and make sure that they don't get done over in the business deals of the sport. And it's a sport that has got a lot of dodgy dealings anyway, so never want to see, because ultimately the fighters are putting their lives on the line every time they step in the ring, and you know they deserve to be compensated for that, and to be messed about, especially financially, I don't think would be a good look for any fighter or for Zuffa Boxing. And I don't understand as well how because they've done obviously like a trailer showing off their new belt. But if you're a promotional company, you can't also be a sanctioning body. Yeah, exactly.
This is the whole thing they want to change, isn't it? Within the Ali Act, so that they can operate as both the promoter and the sanctioning body, and kind of work within its own sphere, like it's similar in a way it does to the UFC. But I think the reason I'm reticent by the whole thing, and the reason going into this in my head, I was thinking, right, I'm going to kind of stamp my authority on this a little bit, is because a business model that is based on having to change law that is put in place to protect fighters from being extorted by promoters, being extorted by managers, being extorted by sanctioning bodies. One man in theory, in Dana White, wanting to become every one of his fighters, managers, promoters, and sanctioning bodies. It's a really scary thought, like you say. And, you know, I think it's easy to kind of brush it off and go, well, you know, they'll sign it if they want to sign it. If they don't, they won't, to a degree. But when when they're talking about it and showing off a belt that, like you say, at this stage is illegal, it's difficult to kind of buy into it, I think.
Yeah, I'm still confused by it all, because in terms of what Dana White has said, he doesn't, or he's spoke before how he doesn't want to work with the other sanctioning bodies, sort of wants to make the Zuffa belt its own thing. And I think from what I've seen, they're going to have like the internal champion with the Zuffa belt, and then the Ring magazine is like the like epitome, like the top world title. But signing someone then like Jai Opetaia, who was talking about wanting to become undisputed and fight in unification fights, where does that fit in? Like, surely they've had some discussion. Like, Jai Opetaia wouldn't have signed there knowing that the only belt he can now fight for is Zuffa Boxing's belt, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately all of it comes back to money talks. And if the money makes sense, then people will move to it. But the way I see it at the moment is I can't see boxers buying into it for the exact reasons you say. You speak to any boxer, what do you want to win? WBC world title. What do you want to do? I want to become undisputed. Mm-hmm. So I can't see top boxers buying into it. In terms of boxing fans, again, I just don't know if I see them buying into it. I think it's the big stars, it's the undisputed fights, it's the massive fights that people, on the whole, the bulk of casual boxing fans certainly care about. And they're not going to have that. You know, we saw it with the WBC Grand Prix, which on paper, brilliant idea. But the ultimate downfall of it is no one knew who anyone was. And so no one really cared. And it kind of faltered towards the end, and it lost momentum. And unless they can secure more and more stars, I think they're going to really struggle. And I think that it's concerning if I don't care about it. because we sit down every single week, twice a week often, talk about boxing on a podcast. And if I struggle to get excited about it, something's not right.
Yeah. From my perspective, I'm hoping that it turns into something good for the sport, because obviously the more the sport grows, the better it is for everyone who's involved and enjoys it. But I'm still on the fence. I think because we don't necessarily know a lot about it at this point, and there seems to be so many different stories coming out in terms of how they want to run Zuffa Boxing, and I just, like you said, I can't see other fighters getting along with that idea if it is just a fight for that one belt, and then you're sort of avoiding the other sanctioning bodies. But I was really surprised when I seen Jai Opetaia sign it, because that's a pretty big statement, because he's the best cruiserweight on the planet, you could argue, but I just can't see him giving up the... I know he's been waiting to fight for Undisputed for ages, but is he going to walk away from that now to just fight for this new promotion and only focus on that belt? I can't see that happening.
No, I agree. And that's why I really was shocked when I saw it. And it is, like you say, it's a real coup. It's a great signing.
They've signed a few others as well. F.A. Jagba, I think, has signed each. Charles Martin signed.
But, F.A. Jagba, I think when you look at it, it kind of makes sense. He's someone who's been at the periphery of the kind of world title level. Never really made that jump. Got the, I think, draw it was with Martin Bakole. He's there or thereabouts, but will almost certainly never quite make that next step. And so for him, you're looking at, okay, here's a chance to be a champion, to be the best in his division within an organization. So I can completely understand it from his point of view. But like you say, with Jai Opetaia, and I think as well, the way I see it at the moment, which I think possibly concerns me a little bit, is you look at the UFC model, and at various points in it, their biggest stars, Francis Ngannou, Conor McGregor, have moved on to world title boxing, or an attempt to, because that's where the money is, it's where the interest is, it's where the excitement is. And what's to say that fighters won't use the Zuffa system to get a name for themselves and then try and, sue them, get out of a contract, which, like we kind of have reiterated at this stage, would have been an illegal contract anyway, and get out. We saw Virgil Ortiz recently as his fought to get out of his contract with Oscar De La Hoya because he's not making the fight with Boots Ennis and all of this sort of stuff. I just don't see top world title boxers sitting around and letting Dana call the shots in the way he'd say it's the same way he does with the UFC, because MMA is a sport that's 30, 40 years old. Yeah. Boxing's a sport that's 200 years old. Professional boxing, started in sort of late 1800s in the UK. You're talking such history that I just can't see people throwing away. Yeah,
I think that's the difference between the UFC and boxing. Like you said, Dana White was very much at the forefront of the UFC and MMA, so he had the ability to sort of control the narrative when it come to building it and how that business was going to run. But boxing in its own right is like the Wild West of sport. It's got its own sort of full ecosystem that, as crazy as it is, like there's so many moving parts, and it's been going for so long that I don't think you can mess with that now. And it's not as if those other sanctioning bodies are just going to lie down and accept the fact that someone's going to, take over the sport and try and push us all out of the way. I know it's got a financial backing of Turki Alalshikh as well, which is obviously going to help. But still, I think they are going to have to rethink of how they're going to go around it. In terms of that Zuffa belt, though, it could be like one of those belts where you've got fighters who are probably not good enough to win a world title of one of the other sanctioning bodies that will just pick that up and can class themselves as a world champion.
But it's like the IBO. It's the same, but no one goes, he's a world champ. If you're an IBO world champ, it goes, okay, well now he's in line to maybe fight for something else. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously they've got a card this weekend in Vegas, which obviously again, I don't know how they're getting around it. I think the Nevada Athletic Commission are sanctioning it. So at the moment, they're kind of working within the rules of boxing that exist while they're still trying to obviously get that Ali Act changed. You know, they've got some decent fights on there. Kane Sandoval, Callum Walsh versus Carlos Ocampo. You know, there's some decent fights on that bill, but it's not the statement entrance to the sport that gets people talking, is it?
No, well, there was some sort of rumours when, was it Crawford and Canelo fighting each other, that Dana White was going to be involved in that, and it kind of went quiet, I think.
He sort of was and wasn't he?
Yeah.
It was, and that was TKO boxing.
Yeah, it was more TKO than Zuffa.
It was very odd.
There's too much going on, too much to fall over. Yeah, hopefully it turns out a positive for the sport, because obviously the more opportunities there is for fighters, then the better it is for them. But we don't want to see fighters sort of get taken advantage of, let's say, in terms of building them up to a point, and then they're sort of limited to what they can do. Because, like you said, we've seen it in the UFC. You still see it now, like their top stars now, like Tom Aspinall has even talked about going over to boxing in the coming years, if he can still compete, obviously, with what's happened with his eye injury and all stuff like that. But even he's talked about, it's just, there's so much more money to be made in boxing, and the reason why those top athletes get to that level and want to compete to that level is because they can make that kind of money as well, and they're not going to be happy with taking way less for the same amount of risk. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I suppose the if we're going to kind of pick holes in it, we have to kind of look for benefits as well. And there is the fact that what the UFC has sort of historically done quite well is you fight the best, because they're sanctioning it, they're choosing how much you get paid, they're managing you. Like one man in theory in Dana White controls everything, and so he can make whatever he wants happen, right? And if that is in the best interest of the viewers and the fans and the fighters, great. But obviously, as we've said, if it's not, there's some concerns there. But also, you know, and I'm saying this purely from somebody who doesn't hugely buy into the UFC. I've tried to get into it. I like it. I don't love it. You got someone like John Jones that everyone was saying, fight Tom Aspinall, fight Tom Aspinall, fight Tom Aspinall. That fight never got made. And under the idea of any fight that can get made gets made, there must have been a reason that Dana White chose not to make that fight. And that, again, the same benefit of that's how any fight can get made. He can also stop any fight he doesn't want getting made, which is a concerning point of view. At the moment, if two boxers can agree on money and there's a promoter that's willing to pay and there's a broadcaster that's willing to put it on, you've got a fight.
Yeah, it works completely fine the way it is, so there's no need to... I understand from a business point of view it's going to cost you a lot more money, but ultimately that's the way the sport goes. That's the way sport in general is going. It's more money every day.
Do you think it will remove some of the frustrations, though, that perhaps some casual fans or a lot of kind of other combat sport fans that can't buy into boxing, their frustration is the stuff that we kind of laugh off as, it's just boxing, isn't it? And the stuff that is the hallmarks of that kind of early 1900s sport, the Wild West, like you call it. Is there a chance that this could be a model in which a different viewership can buy into, which then transitions them into watching, you know, the rest of boxing?
I think maybe to some degree, and I do agree with the fact that they do a very good job of making a large amount of time making the best fight the best. But we spoke about it earlier. Boxing is it's so different to the UFC in the way it's been run, and fighters now do have a lot of the power and the say when it comes to who they are fighting and if they're willing to fight, because they need to know the money is right. And I can just only see if they try and implement that UFC model and style into boxing, you're just going to find more and more fighters will just say, no, I'm not doing it. Because they're not going to, you can't expect fighters who have been, and especially over the last few years since obviously the whole Riyadh season involvement where the money is skyrocketed, you're not going to walk away from that and then suddenly be happy with a massive pay cut for taking the same risk and probably guaranteed hard fight after hard fight after hard fight every time. I just don't. It just wouldn't work in the sport, I don't think. And there's so many different options out there with so many different sanctioning bodies and different promoters. Because people like Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, they're not just going to look, and they certainly haven't been looking at Dana White and been, put off by the fact that he wants to get involved in the sport. It's more, they're looking at him like, try and come and compete with us because we've been doing this for a lot longer than you. We know how it works, and it's not going to be as easy as you think it is to just walk in here and take over.
Yeah, I think we saw, particularly with like Ben Schlum and Boxer, the treatment he got from Eddie and Frank. They kind of little brothered him in many ways. They haven't really tried to give Dana that treatment yet.
No.
And I get the sense it's because at this stage they're not necessarily feeling threatened by it, but that might come in the future. It'd be interesting to see, but this is all speculation. I think once we kind of see in the next year or so, particularly with someone like Jai Opetaia, when you see what fights he's getting, how he's fighting, it will be interesting to see. But I'm going to move on to some. I was going to say some actual boxing, and that's harsh because Zuffa are trying to do actual boxing at least. But the stuff we know and love. Raymond Muratalla versus Andy Cruz for the IBF World Lightweight title. It's a really interesting fight. Obviously, Muratalla beat Abdullayev, I think it was, for the interim. And then he's fighting now Andy Cruz. Andy Cruz is someone, I think he's going to be, 6-7-0 if he wins this fight. Obviously had an extensive amateur career. What do we make of it as a matchup?
I'm really looking forward to this fight. I thought it was going to be a busier weekend of boxing, but yeah, that is really good fight to kick off the year. I think a lot of people have got it down as a 50-50, and it's a one of those good style matchups of Muratalla's pressure and sort of power punching against Andy Cruz, who has got that obviously very extensive amateur background, a gold medalist in the Olympics, and he took to the professional game like a duck to water as well, to be fighting for a world title in your 7th pro fight. I know he's 30 years old, so he come over to the pros a lot later, but he's done very well and performed very well since he turned over as a professional. But this will be a very good fight on Saturday night. It really could go either way, but yeah, it's a tough first title defense as well for Muratalla. Obviously, he got elevated and after Lomachenko retired. So yeah, it's a tough one, but one I'm really looking forward to watching. I'm still struggling to go what way I'm going to go with the prediction, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree, because I think, like you say, it's such an odd sort of circumstance in the sense of Muratalla having been upgraded to the champion, and then Andy Cruz being someone who's so shortly been a professional boxer. Kind of as a matchup, it's so hard to kind of picture. And the thing with Andy Cruz is every fight he's improved, he's reinvented, he's stepped up in many ways. Those first fights, it was technically he was a different level, and then he was, you could see him sort of sitting down on shots more, becoming more and more in tune with that professional style as he gets on and kind of has just come on leaps and bounds. And this is the kind of culmination of all of that into one fight. I think this is a crazy thing to say. I think Andy Cruz probably does come into it the favourite. Yeah, I haven't looked at the odds.
I think he is slightly the favourite in terms of the odds, but it is crazy to say in terms of his 7. There can't be many fighters out there. I know you see it a bit more in female boxing, but with the males, there can't be many that have fought for a world title after just 7 pro fights.
Nah, I don't think there is at all. And yeah, it's a really interesting matchup. I think, like you say, we've got it in once again in Vegas. So Matchroom and Zuffa going head to head in the same city. But this is the better fight, isn't it? Out of the weekend, it is a really great fight.
Yeah, it's the best fight to watch this weekend. It's a decent card. We've got the likes of Omari Jones on there. Madrimov is back as well, which I didn't realise until earlier when I was looking at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, that the Madrimov is back, because, you know, he's come off the back of, you know, a couple big fights on against, what was it, Virgil Ortiz and
Terence Crawford.
Terence Crawford.
That's a tough last two
and
fights.
when you look at it as a performance against Terence Crawford in particular, you know, where, you know, he certainly, I think you'd be struggle to say he performed any worse than Canelo did against Crawford, but obviously styles are different, and I think Crawford struggled with the style of Madrimov.
Yeah.
But you know, we've seen him at the top level, and he can certainly compete. So it'd be nice to see him moving back towards that. And the other one we've got is Calico Jesse Hart, which is on. You know, they're both fighters with a loss on their record. Both fighters. I get the sense this is the kind of American equivalent of a British title fight. You know, a British heavyweight title fight, where it's like it might not be the highest level, but it's going to be a good scrap.
Yeah, you can never turn down a heavyweight title fight, no matter what level. But yeah, it's a really good card, and I didn't even think, to be fair, that the two of them, both Zuffa and Matchroom, go in against each other in the same place. But never know, you might get Eddie Hearn and Dana White bumping into each other at some point through the week, and we'll see the first real back and forth between them two, which would be nice. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That main event, a really good fight to kick off. I was hoping that we'd get the Queensbury show as well. Obviously, that's been cancelled, but yeah, that more than makes up for it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think with as well, we talk about that. We talk about the quality of Andy Cruz. You know, Omari Jones is a guy, a young guy, admittedly, but he's a guy who's had a very good amateur career in his own right, and he's 4-0 now. Yes, he's fighting someone who's 6-0, I think it is. So it's a step up, but Andy Cruz at 4-0 was already fighting, I think, in 10 rounders. You know, he was getting ready for titles. Yeah, I think he fought in his debut for an IBF International.
Yeah, it was.
So, you know, I think that shows the level of him. But Omari Jones is someone we've spoken about a number of times on the channel since he made his debut. Really impressive fighter, really exciting fighter. We've got an interview with him on the channel that, you know, feel free to check out. I'll try and remember to put it in the card somewhere up here. If you're listening on audio, I'm pointing at the sky, probably wrongly. But yeah, there's some really great stuff on there, and we'll do the predictions on that card at the end of the episode. But we've kind of mentioned it a couple times. The Magnificent Seven card was meant to be this weekend and was cancelled due to an injury to Moses Itauma. Frustrating. You lose a fight with Moses Itauma, always exciting. But I think there was quite a frustration and a bit of a kickback on this because it was billed as a Magnificent Seven. So if you lose one of the seven, surely there's still 6 magnificent fights. And yet we've had to reschedule it, which is really frustrating. You know, if it's a normal card and you lose a main event, you kind of go, yeah, fair, push it back. Cool. But the concept of this is it's good top to bottom. Surely you can change venue or, you know, find another main event or something to keep this card alive rather than pushing it back to March.
Yeah, I think it's really frustrating. I'd be so frustrated if I was one of those fighters. You look like someone, for example, like Nathan Heaney. I don't know if you've seen the post he put on socials, but spent £1,000 of his own money traveling around, giving out the tickets he'd sold and sending tickets out to people, all for that to be a complete waste. I would be sitting there thinking, what is the point in doing this anymore? That would be so frustrating and such a gut punch after you're not only doing all that and selling tickets and trying to make money, but you're also training every day for this fight that you think is coming up, for it to be pulled so late on. And I know it's frustrating they've lost Moses Itauma, who's a massive draw, massive talent. But like you said, that Ezra Taylor, Willie Hutchinson fight, just bump that up to the main event and add an extra fight on, make it the 7 fights again. Surely they could have done that or found a way to keep the show going for the rest of those fighters who have now got to go through another training camp and all the hassle of selling tickets or whatever again. But yeah, it is a frustrating one, especially when something we've talked about a lot on here is we didn't get to see many sort of big UK fight nights last year, and they just need to do a better job, I think, of when something like this comes up, being prepared to fix it or, you know, give these fighters a chance still to get out and fight, because some of these would have been waiting ages to get out on a card, especially in the UK. And then for it to be waiting even longer, it just must be so frustrating.
Yeah, and even on that, take Moses Itauma, Jermaine Franklin out of this. It's still one of the better cards we've seen in the last sort of 12 months in the UK, and that's a frustrating thing to say, based because it's what it says about the quality of some of the cards we've seen in the UK, but also, there's no reason why it couldn't have stayed. Willie Hutchinson, Ezra Taylor is a great fight. Liam Davis, Zach Miller is a great fight. Shaquille Thompson versus Brad Pools. Brad Pools is a guy that did 3 back-to-back main events on the Queensbury card, lost 1 fight to Denzel Bentley, and was stuck fighting in Torquay, and was nearly fighting on the galleries, and he cancelled a fight in Bristol to fight on this card because this opportunity came up, and then now he's got neither. Like you say, Nathan Heaney, that's a fighter that has had a fall off, has had a difficult time in terms of that fight with Brad Pools, and he's fighting against Jerome Warburton, someone who's fought so hard to get to where he is. There were so many fighters on this card that really deserved this opportunity. And yes, they're still getting it in March, but after being hugely out of pocket and at the expense of what still remains to be a very good card. I just don't get it. It's still a good card.
Yeah, and I do think with even taking Moses Itauma out of it, I still feel like the rest of those fighters on that card would have done a good job of selling out most of the tickets. I know a lot of people would be going there in the mindset of, I'm going to watch Moses Itauma, but I still feel like you could have got a very good crowd in there and a good fight night. And I just feel like you can't always just rely on the same people to be the main event and to sell out shows in the UK, because if you're only just going to use the same names constantly, you're not creating any new stars or giving a platform to enough fighters to build what at the moment feels like quite a weak UK boxing scene. Because we've already touched on, we haven't, or certainly haven't had a lot of top quality UK shows over the last couple of years, with a lot of the bigger fights going abroad. But I think they need to, make sure that they stay consistent with putting on shows in the UK now over the next few months to give fighters a platform, keep building stars, because the more stars you go, the healthier the sport is, and the promoters are only going to benefit from that. So I think that's what they need to focus on doing more of.
Yeah, I suppose the only sort of caveat to this is the fact that I think what likely happened was that they obviously want Moses Itauma out in March, and they probably, with the St. Paddy Day card and the cards they've already announced and the Nick Ball card, they probably didn't have the depth to put on another undercard under that. So that was probably rather than it being the fact that they didn't have a main event to put on this undercard, they probably wouldn't have had an undercard to put on that main event, which is maybe why they've made the decision. And it is frustrating because we've actually got some really cracking cards to start off this year. This one was a great card to kick it off, and then the St. Paddy's Day card that they've got announced, the Nick Ball versus Brandon Figueroa, great fight, good card. Lee Wood, Josh Warrington, again, good fight, great card. There was lots of options to get excited for, and it's just kind of a little bit like, oh, come on. Yeah. Give us what we want, man.
It went from a very busy January to feels like it's slowed down a bit, but
then next weekend, next weekend, I was having a look, kind of looking ahead, and it's like every fight under the sun that is worth watching is happening over the course of one weekend. So I think we might have to do a double header preview next week. No review, double header preview or something. I don't know how we'll have to work that one out. But
yeah, we'll have to have a look at everything. But yeah, maybe it's just us being greedy, but I just want to see more big fight nights in the UK. I think there's just so many fighters that seem to be struggling to get on cards or get fights, and I think they need to look after boxing in the UK a bit more, because I think it'll catch up to them quicker than they realise, and you just want to see the sport in its healthiest position. And there is some very good cards coming up, like the Wood Warrington. I know Lauren Price is announced that she's fighting in Cardiff in April as well. So there is fights to look forward to, and it might come across that we're asking for too much sometimes. But yeah, I just want to see plenty of opportunities for UK fighters, and there's nothing better than a UK fight night. Like when you get to that Wood Warrington fight week, it's going to be electric all week, and that atmosphere in it, you just can't compete with it no matter where else you are in the world. I don't think there's any place better for boxing.
Nah, I couldn't agree more. Should we jump into the predictions?
Yeah.
Now, I don't think we did a predictions last week, but we
didn't have one, did we?
We announced that we're going to be taking these things a little bit more seriously this year. Harry sits atop the table at the moment, which is wrong on so many levels. But are we saying absence counts as a no score, an automatic 3-0 loss?
He hasn't turned up.
I think that's only fair. And seeing as he's not here to defend himself, then I think whatever we say goes. We've only got the 3 fights on the predictions this week, so it's a nice easy one. Not a huge. No one's going to be pulling away a huge gap from one another. But I'll let you start it off. Actually, do you know what? I'll start it off. I'll be fair. Israel Madrimov versus Luis David Salazar. Madrimov, I think, is going to get a points decision victory. He's not Argentinian, Salazar. He's Dominican, I believe, but still tough nonetheless. I think Madrimov is just going to, go through the paces.
Yeah, I've gone with Madrimov points decision as well. I think it's one of those ones, get the rounds under your belt and start preparing for some more big fights through 2026.
The weird thing with Madrimov is he is a sort of slightly big hitter, isn't he? He's not got that one-shot knockout power, but in fights where he's on top, he has that accumulative effect, and he does get quite a lot of stoppages. But like you say, I think just get the confidence back, shake off that ring rust, and then get going again. Calico, Jesse Hart. Difficult one to call, this one, actually. So sorry for leaving you with that one, but what are you calling on this one?
I don't know whether to go. They both got an 80% knockout rate. I'm going to go Calico decision.
I'm going for a Jesse Hart knockout. I think Calico is the favourite in this one. He's probably the slightly better boxer. But he lost to Manuel Gallegos, I believe it was. And he looked a little bit suspect in that one, and he didn't look that confident, I don't believe, in the rematch either. So I just think he's going to build into it. He's going to be fighting well. He's going to be putting on the pressure, and then in every heavyweight way, one shot, change the fight. Bang. That's what I'm calling.
To be honest, I don't know an awful lot about Jesse Hart, but you can never go wrong with watching a heavyweight fight, so I'm looking forward to it anyway. The main event is the tough one to call. Raymond
Muratalla versus Andy Cruz. It is such a difficult one to call. And Cruz doesn't fight in that same way anymore, where you can confidently say Cruz points decision. Like that was kind of a banker in his first 3 or 4 fights. But now, he has got a bit of power behind those hands. But I suppose he does have that crutch to fall back on, that he knows if he's struggling in a fight, he can kind of fall back on that pure boxing style, get a bit of control back. And based off of that, I'm going to go for an Andy Cruz points decision. But I think there's going to be a few shaky moments where a guy might be hurt on either side, dig deep, and it goes the distance.
Yeah, I think he's going to show real respect for Muratalla's power and box maybe a lot more on the back foot and use that sort of... the more technical skills that he's got to pick up a points decision as well. I've gone for the banker of a Andy Cruz points decision.
See, that just does feel harsh on Muratalla, doesn't it?
It does feel very
Sometimes
harsh.
These fights, because you're calling it and you're sort of 55-60% confident in your answer, and we all kind of go the same way, and then it feels like... it feels harsh on whoever's not. Muratalla has every chance.
Oh yeah, I would
fight.
not be shocked if he picks up a win on the weekend, and this could be his first real statement performance where people really start to take notice. I know that might sound a bit harsh, at being 23-0 and is coming in as the world champion. First offence, it's a tough fight, but yeah, I think a lot of people are seeing it as very much a 50-50 fight, but just edging towards Cruz slightly because of that technical ability, and I think he'll just be a bit cleaner with his work and pick up the decision.
Yeah, and I think as well, what I love about this weight category is it's a 4-way split champs, and there's nobody that you would say, yeah, he's the man. Maybe Shakur Stevenson, I suppose, but he doesn't have that kind of, knockout, like smashes people out of there. So you don't get too excited about him. Tank Davis is on hold. Muratalla or Andy Cruz, whoever wins this one, you've got Abdullah Mason, and then around that, there's William Zepeda, Floyd Schofield. There's so many top fighters, and then Javier Herrera, like we said, picked up the WBC interim. There's so many interesting fights to be made in and around lightweight and super lightweight for that matter.
I would love to see Javier Herrera and Andy Cruz.
I mean, the build up and the fight week would be fireworks. They're both quite. I was going to say arrogant, which is probably harsh, but it's probably right. They both confident guys, aren't they?
Yeah, it would be a good watch. I wonder who would be next in line IBF wise.
I don't actually know who the IBF mandatory is, but obviously there's just like, there's talks of Joe Cordina hopefully getting that fight with Abdullah Mason. I think Sam Noakes comes off the back of a loss with as much stock as he went into it, really. So, there's some interesting stuff to be happened there, some interesting moving parts.
Look, there's so many names there. You could make so many good world title fights out of the top 20, 25 fighters in that division. It's one that's exciting for 2026. I think have some really big fights, and you've got the likes of Shakur Stevenson and
Teofimo Lopez
as well. Are they fighting at lightweight or super lightweight?
I think I want to say it's a lightweight.
It is lightweight,
but I could be wrong. But it's really hard to kind of how they're pitching that one.
Light.
Is it a super lightweight? So Shakur's stepping up. I guess they're letting him keep the belt, of course, because it's the BBC. They wouldn't want to slap the hat on anyone else. But there is interesting stuff if Shakur decides, do you know what? I'm done at lightweight. Let's have a go at super lightweight. And then suddenly you've got Javier Herrera as the WBC champion, which would be, it would be impressive, probably slightly surprising for him. And then suddenly you've got a scramble, I think, to try and get that fight.
You've got some good... If you get, obviously, the winner between this weekend's fight, Muratalla and Cruz, if he gets elevated then to WBC, you've got Abdullah Mason, Joe Cordina, looks likely to be happening as well. You've got some very good unification fights there between a lot of different fighters that you could put together. So, yeah, I think 2026 could be the year of the lightweights by the looks of it.
Yeah, hopefully we get some big ones. If you like the sound of that, then stick around and subscribe or follow us on Spotify if you prefer the audio versions. We'll be back next week with, like I said, I think we're going to do 2 podcasts, both looking at ahead, and we'll try and kind of fit this review into there as well. Hopefully we'll have Harry back with us in the studio as well. Otherwise, we will see you all next week.
Punches chance. Punches chance podcast.